Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Lonely Liberal Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Zankin, and I'm so happy to have you here on this lovely Wednesday. I wanted to talk today a little bit more unstructured than normal. I mean, not that they're that structured of shows normally, but we're going to do a show about AI next week. We're going to do it this week, but some scheduling stuff got in the way, so stay tuned for an episode next week about should we freak out about AI. I instead wanted to talk about just kind of all the political discourse I've been seeing over the last couple of days. And specifically, I wanted to talk to the conservative listeners of the show. And, you know, obviously the show is called The Lonely Liberal Podcast, so it's probably safe. You know, people probably think, oh, most people who listen are liberal. And in fact, you know, a lot of people are. But actually, a very, very large swath of the audience is moderate or even conservative based off of the comments I get. Actually, it would be really interesting, actually, if you are listening, if you could either comment on YouTube or write an email at thelonelyliberalpodcast@gmail.com what your kind of political leanings are. Not because of, it's just more my own interest, but from what I gather, actually a lot of people are either middle or middle right. And it's interesting because obviously last week, the assassination of Charlie Kirk happened last Wednesday. You could literally hear, I was recording while the guy got shot, and, you know, you could hear me audibly be frazzled about it. And, and then obviously Sunday, and I've gotten some comments and feedback on that. And it's been really interesting talking to different people, having some good conversations about, you know, everything both on the left and the right. And one thing that I've noticed a lot and has been exposed as now being somebody who's in political discourse, who has friends on the right and on the left, and, you know, regularly engages with people on both sides, how much of a vacuum we live in, whether it's because of social media algorithms, whether it's just community. It's so interesting because if you talk to a lot of people on the left, they are not really reacting the way a lot of the people on the right think they are acting, and vice versa. So what I wanted to do, like I said, I wanted to just talk and rant and some thoughts out, but more so just to try to, you know, keep the conversation more normal, I guess, right? So for starters, and I think this is important, but interesting, literally nobody I know or have seen on my social media algorithms has celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk. There have been people who have been kind of maybe like neutral or snarky in the response to the way Trump responded, but I haven't seen anyone like full of glee the way the right says people are. Now, I will, of course, acknowledge that, you know, MSNBC had that guy say something like he reap what you sow or whatever and got fired, as he should have been. But I just wanted to clarify that. I know that a lot of people on the right are saying that they are seeing this like kind of like joyous glee from a lot of people on the left. And I'm not discrediting them. I'm sure it exists there. But the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because I just wanted to let you know that that's the minority of people, okay? Like, most people, on both parties, obviously, but in this case, I want to talk about the left, think that a political assassination or political violence is disgusting. And again, now many people on the left think Charlie Kirk, they don't agree with him at all. And they may have hated the guy. I think, you know, they don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know how anyone could hate someone they don't know other than like someone who's literally like a political leader, like someone like Trump or Biden or whatever, a president, you know, someone who's so influential. So maybe, again, they're not shedding tears. That being said, like I said, nobody normal is going, woo, this is great. That's crazy, right? And anyone who is doing that is crazy and probably makes up a very, very small fraction of the population. Doesn't make it okay. Those people are nuts, right? And that's just the case. And I think what happens a lot of the time, and maybe you'll say I'm in the tank for this stuff, so fair enough, lean into me. I can take it. I have a podcast with the name liberal in the title. What do you think? I didn't expect getting sass. Of course I did. What I think happens a lot of the time in these kind of cycles is something bad happens, right? Either on the left or on the right or in neutral. Like, so let's take the Kirk assassination for example. Charlie Kirk gets assassinated. It's looking like the guy, we still don't really know about the shooting. He definitely, he's maybe dating a trans person, it seems like. Let's say he's on the left. I don't think that's clear yet, but let's say, right? Someone does something crazy. What happens, what's so important is the response to that from the leaders of the country, right? Every major politician on the left, from Bernie Sanders, from AOC, from Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, all condemned this as Gavin Newsom as disgusting, because it is, right? Everyone on the right also condemned this as disgusting. Now, there were a lot of claims from both the vice president, from Trump, from, Mace from South Carolina, that said stuff like, the left is awful, radical left is horrible, like pointing a lot of blame, using a lot of political point scoring type stuff. And I think what happens is, right, is people on the left see that, they get defensive, as they should, right? Because they're being accused for something horrible. And then what happens is they start looking for things to prove it wrong, right? So then they say stuff like, well, actually, right-wing leaning terrorists are the biggest cause of death. And actually, Trump is a maniac and blah, blah, blah. And again, it comes from a defensive posturing when you get blamed, just like when someone calls Trump a fascist or these things racist or something like that, and people who voted for Trump or people who supported him say, wait a minute, I'm not racist or I don't feel like a fascist and I'm supportive like Trump, and they project that kind of statement to them, and then they get very defensive. It's a very relatable and understandable opinion, but I think the difference is that if some random person on the internet calls you a racist, yeah, they suck, but that's the extent of it. The president of the United States throwing these terms around, like Kamala did, frankly, too. So she has dirt here. Like, that matters more than me saying something. That matters more than anyone saying something. And it's not a justification for why people do crazy shit. Like Trump, stoking the flames of political research by calling Democrats vermin or the enemy within, or saying he literally hates Democrats the other day, like, a few months ago. All that shit is awful, but it's not an excuse to do something crazy like kill someone, right? And so two things can be true, right? Trump is the most nasty president we've had in terms of the way he communicates in Discord. I mean, it's literally his thing. That's his personality type. But that doesn't mean people should act insane, right? And what I think the challenges here is you have to keep kind of some degree of perspective, right, about the wider problem, which is that political discourse has been just stuffed to the gills with hatred from both sides. And coupled with we're having more gun deaths than ever before and just violent crime in this way. And we have this kind of indefinite cycle of tragedy. And what it basically does is it get absorbed into the cultural war machine instead of being treated like a human loss. For example, you've been hearing a lot about Melissa Horman, the state senator from Minnesota, who was assassinated at her home, and her husband. And you're hearing a lot of people on the left say, well, where was the vigil? Where was this, outpour for her when, something very similar happened to Kirk, and we're seeing that response. Now, obviously, Kirk was a much more popular figure, so I'm not so surprised that there's a lot more response. But I think the president of the United States should really care when a major political figure is assassinated. And Trump didn't go to the funeral, and he didn't seem to care. In fact, he attacked the governor of Minnesota when that happened. That's in bad taste, right? That's bad, right? We can agree with that. So my point is that when things feel hypocritical, just the way that when liberals do hypocritical shit all the time, Democrats are so hypocritical it's not even funny. That's why the show's called Lonely Liberal. It makes people angry. And I think when people, what we should be doing, right, is obviously using this tragedy as a moment to mend the hate, right? We should be saying, holy shit, look at how crazy people have gotten. People are literally shooting people they don't agree with. This country has lost its goddamn mind. And we should be looking towards our leaders, right, to set an example to behave better. So this rant, I guess, right, it's kind of a plea for unity, right? I mean, I don't like arguing. I get YouTube comments all the time, and oftentimes I'll respond just because I'm really interested, and then they get mad, and I don't often fight. I don't like fighting. I don't like the sassy gotcha debates. I really don't. I don't like someone saying, you said it was 6, it was really 5, and blah, 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 blah. I don't like it. I think it's stupid. I think we're getting raked over the coals here by a crazy administration. And instead of focusing on how crazy they are, we're focusing on hating each other, which is so upsetting. At the end of the day, what happened to Charlie Kirk is awful. And what's happening to our political rhetoric is awful. And again, instead of weaponizing this vulnerability to feed more hatred, what we should want from our leaders is a moment of solace and a moment of solidarity and a moment to look for common ground. Nobody wants to live in fear of being shot at work, at school, or at an event. We don't have to agree on the policy, but we should agree that the bloodshed needs to stop. And look, I'm not going to stop criticizing Trump. I think Trump sucks. I think I had a professor of fascist history on the show to learn more about German and Austrian history and trying to compare. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. And when experts tell me this is reeks of authoritarianism and fascism, then I'm going to take it seriously. But again, when we criticize Trump, we're not criticizing people who supported him. At least I'm not. I don't know what the fuck they're doing at MSNBC, CNN. I don't know what they're doing. Frankly, they drive me crazy too. But we just need to keep this energy when people use us and pit us against each other to divide us. Dude, Fox News does this all the time. Too, come on. Really, the show, the thing is an opinion piece. The whole thing is an opinion. Really? This is peaceful? You really think Fox News is the channel of uniting, right? All we can do is work with the facts, okay? And I know a lot of people listening think, the January 6th stuff was overblown. It wasn't an insurrection. It was more of a riot. What about these other riots? That's, I can't convince you if you think that the jargon. I don't care. What I do care is I think we can all agree that was one of the biggest moments of political violence in this country's history, at least recent history. I said something, I actually talk about a good conversation I had with a dude on YouTube. I had been saying that 9 people had died on January 6th. That's not true. Or I said 9 people had been killed. 9 people died in a very umbrella-y way of looking at it. We're talking about strokes. We're talking about heart attacks. We're talking about suicide. Again, I don't know the personal lives of these people, but regardless of the death count, and which is, again, 1 death is too many in my opinion, that is without a doubt a huge event of political violence, and literally all of them got pardoned. Trump pardoned them all. And if you want to tell me the left is to blame for a lot of the political insanity that's going on, I'm right there with you. But if you're trying to deny that Trump pardoning 1,000+ people who literally had a violent protest at the Capitol building of this country didn't also do that, you're in denial. And that will be a tough place. But I'm here to try. So, like I said, this is me just saying, look, guys. And if you're a Democrat and you listen to all this stuff and you're like, dude, you're being too nice about Kirk, blah, 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 blah. Dude, come on. The guy just freaking died. And like I said, I didn't agree with a word that guy said. It doesn't really matter. All right? I don't believe in gun violence. I think gun violence is a tragedy. I think the death penalty is silly. I certainly think death penalty without a trial is crazy. I think that we have the most depressing state of affairs this country has been in my lifetime, and the fear that and numbness this country is feeling is just so, so sad. Unfortunately, like I've joked around a lot on the show, I like this country a lot and I care about it. That's why I do this show. So look, instead of, demonizing people on the other side, let's just calm down. I don't hate these people. I don't know these people, frankly. Neither do you. And you know what? The internet makes people seem a lot crazier than the average person is. I know you see Reddit tweets, whatever, 4chan. You find quotes from people it's just crazy. Let's all take a chill pill. Let's all try to say, realize the real problems. Like, we have 50,000 gun deaths a year or whatever. We have a political system that is not representative of the majority of people's beliefs. We've seen horrible, horrible transfers of wealth from the poor to the rich. We've seen our health care just crumble. We're watching, the environment break beyond the seams. We don't even have anything normal right now, So instead of fighting over random social issues and culture wars and stuff like that, can we all just agree that the country isn't serving the vast majority of people, and the only iota of hope this place has is if we put people over party? It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, a conservative, a libertarian, a communist, whatever. I don't care. This country is failing us. And instead of being furious and hateful, we need to all just get together, vote, and rely on facts. And I know a lot of Democrats listening to this show are going to be like, and yeah. Can we cool it with the I told you so's right now? And can we cool it with the snark just for a second? Like I said, I think Trump is an absolute disaster. I think this administration this time around is so considerably worse than the first one, it's hard to even remotely comprehend. But that doesn't reflect the average American. And so the next time you're fuming about a politician, whether it's on the left or on the right, remember their supporters aren't inherently bad, just like your supporters aren't inherently good.